The blood soaked through Sloan Merrick's ACU pants in a spreading dark stain. Shrapnel from the IED had torn through her left calf 20 minutes ago, but her hands stayed steady as she wrapped the field dressing tight. Her own wound would have to wait. Reed tourniquet high and tight on Corporal Jensen's thigh. You've got maybe 90 seconds before he loses consciousness. Her voice carried across the dusty courtyard, despite the ringing in her ears from the blast. Hawkins, keep direct pressure on Staff Sergeant Webb's shoulder. Don't let up, even if he tells you to. Private First Class Dylan Reed stared at her, his face pale beneath the coating of Iraqi dust. The kid was 22, and this was his first real casualty scenario. His hands shook as he fumbled with the tourniquet. Reed, Sloane's tone sharpened just enough. Look at me, breathe, then do it. The young soldier's eyes met hers. He nodded once, inhaled, and his hands steadied. The tourniquet went on properly this time. Sloane finished tying off her own bandage and pushed herself to standing. Pain lanced up her leg, but she kept her face neutral. 118 pounds of compact muscle and stubborn determination in a body that barely cleared 5'4". The smallest person in Charlie Company by a significant margin. And right now, the only functioning medic in a kill zone with 3 wounded soldiers. She grabbed her aid bag and limped toward Jensen. The radio on her vest crackled with the quick reaction force calling for a status update. She keyed the mic without taking her eyes off the femoral artery wound that was trying to kill her patient. Dust off inbound 4 minutes. We're stable. All 3 patients packaged and ready for transport. That was optimistic. Jensen's pulse was thready and his skin had gone the wrong shade of gray. But she'd learned in 8 months of deployment that confidence, even false confidence, kept soldiers from panicking. Her fingers moved with practiced precision, checking the tourniquet placement, starting an IV line, documenting vitals on the card attached to Jensen's vest. Everything by the book. Everything exactly as the Army had trained her. The medevac helicopter's rotors became audible in the distance. Sergeant First Class Camden Stone watched from his position by the compound wall. The senior NCO's weathered face showed nothing, but his eyes tracked every movement Sloane made. Assessing, always assessing. When the Black Hawk touched down and the flight medics took over, Sloane finally allowed herself to sit. The adrenaline started to fade and her leg began to throb in earnest. Stone appeared beside her with a fresh field dressing. Let me see it, Doc. She unwrapped her hasty bandage job. The wound was ugly but manageable. Stone worked in silence, his hands efficient despite their size. When he finished, he sat back on his heels and met her eyes. That's the 3rd time you've been last to get treated, he said quietly. Stop doing that. I'm the medic. That's how it works. Medic's no good to anyone if she bleeds out being stubborn. Sloane almost smiled. Almost. Instead, she just nodded and accepted his hand up. The helicopter lifted off with its cargo of wounded soldiers. All 3 would make it. Jensen would walk again eventually, though it would take months of physical therapy. Webb's shoulder would heal clean. The 3rd casualty, a private from 2nd Squad, whose name Sloane could never remember, had a concussion and some lacerations, but nothing serious. 3 more lives that wouldn't end in the Iraqi dust. 3 more names she wouldn't have to write condolence letters for. She watched the Black Hawk disappear into the pale sky and allowed herself exactly 5 seconds of satisfaction before pushing it away. There would be more casualties tomorrow, or the next day, or the day after that. There always were. That was 96 hours ago. The mess hall at Forward Operating Base Falcon smelled like every military dining facility Sloane had ever been in. Overcooked coffee, industrial cleaning solution, and the particular staleness of food that had traveled too far in too many containers. She filled her tray with something that might have been eggs and found a seat at the end of a long table. Staff Sergeant Marcus Webb sat 3 chairs down, his right arm in a sling. The 42-year-old squad leader had the kind of face that looked carved from granite. 2 deployments to Afghanistan, 1 to Iraq before this current rotation. 20 years in the Army had given him a particular kind of wariness that Sloane recognized because her father had worn the same expression. Merrick. Webb's voice carried that command authority that came from 2 decades of telling soldiers what to do. Need to talk to you about patrol assignments. Sloane took a drink of the terrible coffee and waited. You stay at the aid station during mounted patrols from now on. Captain's orders. She set down the cup carefully. Staff Sergeant, I'm assigned to your squad specifically to provide immediate trauma care during operations. And you can do that from the aid station when we bring casualties back. The golden hour starts when the wound happens, not when someone gets carried to my door. Webb's jaw tightened. Medics don't do tactical work, Merrick. Your job is to patch people up, not run around outside the wire, where you might become a casualty yourself. There it was. The same conversation they'd had variations of since she'd joined the squad 6 months ago. Medics were support personnel. They stayed in protected positions. They treated wounded, but they didn't engage in combat operations beyond what was absolutely necessary for immediate care. She understood the logic. She even agreed with parts of it, but she also knew that soldiers died in those critical minutes between getting hit and reaching an aid station. Tourniquets applied wrong, airways that could have been secured with simple interventions, bleeding that could have been stopped with the right pressure in the right place. Yes, Staff Sergeant, she said, because arguing with Webb never accomplished anything. He meant well. They all did. They just didn't understand that keeping her away from the fighting meant soldiers would die who didn't have to. Corporal Garrett Hawkins dropped into the seat across from her. The 28-year-old designated marksman had the lean, rangy build of someone who'd grown up outdoors. He set his rifle case on the floor with the careful attention of someone who treated his weapon better than most people treated family. "Heard you're getting benched, Doc," Hawkins said around a mouthful of toast. "That's probably smart. No offense, but you're what 120 M24 recoil would put you on your ass." Sloane's fingers tightened fractionally on her coffee cup, just a slight tension that she released immediately. "I'm 118, she said mildly. "And I'm not qualified on the M24 anyway, so it's not relevant." "Right, but even if you were, I mean," Hawkins gestured vaguely, "you're tiny. That's just physics." "Physics?" Sloane took another drink of coffee. "Sure." Private First Class Dylan Reed joined them, his tray piled high with everything the mess hall had to offer. The youngest member of the squad had the kind of metabolism that could burn through 3,000 calories before lunch. He looked at Sloane with the puppyish enthusiasm of someone who still thought deployment was an adventure. "Doc, is it true you're not coming on patrols anymore?" Reed's disappointment was genuine. "But you saved Jensen's leg. You kept Webb from bleeding out. Who's going to do that if you're stuck at base?" "Battalion has other medics," Webb said firmly. "Someone will rotate into the squad." "But they won't be as good as Doc Merrick," Reed protested. Sloane appreciated the loyalty, but she kept her face neutral. "Whoever they assign will be perfectly capable, Reed. We're all trained to the same standard." That was technically true and practically false. She'd seen the other medics work. They were competent. Most of them were even good at their jobs. But they didn't have her edge, the extra sense that told her what was wrong before the symptoms became obvious. They didn't have the hours of additional study she'd put in the medical textbooks she'd read on her own time, the relentless drive to be better because being merely good wasn't enough when lives were at stake. They also didn't have 6 years of her father's training, but that was a different matter entirely. Sergeant First Class Stone settled into the seat beside Webb with the quiet economy of movement that characterized everything he did. At 38, Stone had been in the Army longer than Sloane had been alive. He said little, observed much, and had a reputation for knowing things about people before they knew those things themselves. He looked at Sloane with dark eyes that missed nothing. "How's the leg, Doc?" "Healing clean. I'll be full duty in another week." "That's not what I asked." Sloane met his gaze. "It's fine, Sergeant." Stone's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes suggested he knew exactly how much the wound still hurt and how much morphine she wasn't taking to manage it. He let it go, though. That was Stone's way. He noted things and filed them away and didn't push unless there was a reason. The conversation shifted to the usual soldier talk. Complaints about the food, speculation about when they'd rotate back to the States, arguments about sports teams and movies and which vehicle had the best armor configuration. Sloane ate her eggs and listened without contributing much. She'd learned early in her deployment that being the medic meant occupying a strange middle ground. Part of the team, but somehow separate, trusted with their lives, but not quite one of them. She finished her breakfast and stood to bus her tray. "Merrick," Stone said quietly. Just her name, nothing else. When she looked at him, he held her eyes for a moment longer than necessary. Then he gave a slight nod and went back to his coffee. Sloane had no idea what that meant. With Stone, she rarely did. The aid station occupied a corner of the FOB that had probably been a storage room in whatever Iraqi facility this had been before the invasion. Sloane had organized it with the same precision she brought to everything else. Supplies categorized and inventoried, equipment maintained to manufacturer specifications, treatment protocols posted on the wall, even though she had them all memorized. She was restocking the trauma kits when the call came in. "Doc needs you at the motor pool, heat casualty." She grabbed her aid bag and moved at a run, despite the protest from her healing leg. Heat injuries killed soldiers just as dead as bullets did, and the Iraqi summer was a relentless enemy all its own. Reed lay on the ground beside a Humvee, his face flushed and his breathing rapid and shallow. Two soldiers stood over him, looking uncertain. He just passed out during PT, one of them said. Probably just needs water, right? Sloan dropped to her knees beside Reed and pressed two fingers to his carotid, pulse racing thready irregular, skin hot and dry to the touch. No sweating despite the heat. Heat stroke, she said loud enough for everyone to hear. Not heat exhaustion, stroke. His core temperature is over 104, and his body has stopped trying to cool itself. If we don't bring it down in the next few minutes, his organs start shutting down. She barked orders without looking up. Ice from the mess hall, wet sheets from supply, IV kit from her bag. The soldiers scattered to follow her instructions. Reed's eyes fluttered open. Doc, I just got dizzy for a second. I'm fine. You're not fine. You're in the early stages of multi-system organ failure. Lie still and let me work. She got the IV line started on the second try, pumping cool saline into his dehydrated system. When the ice arrived, she packed it around his neck, armpits, and groin. The major blood vessels there would carry the cooling effect fastest. The wet sheets went over his torso. Webb arrived at some point during the treatment. His good arm crossed over the sling on his injured one. He watched in silence as Sloan stabilized Reed's condition. 10 minutes later, Reed's core temperature had dropped to 102. His pulse steadied. Color returned to normal. He tried to sit up and Sloan pushed him back down with one hand. You're on bed rest for 24 hours minimum. Light duty for 72 after that. And you're drinking a liter of water every hour until I say otherwise. Doc, I feel fine. Reed. She looked at him with the flat expression that made soldiers twice her size shut up. You were maybe 5 minutes from kidney failure. You don't get an opinion on this. He subsided. Smart kid, learning. Webb helped her get Reed to the aid station on a stretcher. Once the private was settled on a cot with strict instructions not to move, Webb turned to Sloan with an expression she couldn't quite read. How'd you know it was heat stroke and not just exhaustion? No sweating, altered mental status, rapid pulse but dry skin. The presentation is pretty distinct once you know what to look for. The other guys thought he just needed water and shade. The other guys aren't medics. Webb studied her for a long moment. Doc Martinez, the medic who was with us last rotation, he would have done the water and shade thing. Sloan said nothing. Martinez had been a perfectly competent medic. He'd also sent 3 soldiers into organ failure before realizing heat exhaustion had progressed to heat stroke. Those 3 soldiers had survived, but they'd done it by luck more than medical intervention. Good call today, Webb said finally. Reed is lucky to have you. After he left, Sloan checked Reed's vitals again and updated his chart. Then she allowed herself to sit for a moment in the quiet of the aid station. Wyatt's voice echoed from years past, a lesson from when she was 13 years old cleaning her rifle on the porch of their Montana ranch in 1995. Sloan, there are things you can do competently and things you can do excellently. Competent gets the job done. Excellent saves lives. Never settle for competent when excellent is possible. She tried to apply that to everything, medicine most of all, because when you were responsible for whether someone lived or died, competent wasn't enough. It would never be enough. 3 days after the heat stroke incident, Stone found her in the aid station reviewing inventory. He set a laptop on her desk screen, angled toward her. Thought you might want to see this, he said in his quiet way. The screen showed a news article from the Billings Gazette, dated June 1998. The photograph made her chest constrict. 16-year-old Sloan in shooting position, rifle braced against her shoulder, safety glasses covering half her face. The headline read, Local Teen Takes Montana State Youth Marksmanship Championship. Her father standing beside her with his hand on her shoulder and pride in his eyes. He looked healthy in the photo, though the cancer was probably already growing inside him. Sloan's breath caught. Stone tapped the caption. S. Merrick, age 16, claiming first place in the precision rifle category. Also says her father, Staff Sergeant Wyatt Merrick of the 75th Ranger Regiment, trained her since age 11. For several seconds, Sloan couldn't find words. She stared at the photograph of herself at 16, young, confident, taken in June 1998, 2 months before the cancer diagnosis, 3 months before the funeral. How did you find this? Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Notice things, Stone said simply, the way you track movement outside the wire, how your fingers move when you hear gunfire. That scar on your right shoulder that looks like old recoil bruising. Started wondering. Did some research. He closed the laptop and met her eyes. Your father was Somalia, right? Mogadishu's down. Yes, October 1993. He came back in early 94. That was a bad day for a lot of good men. It was. Stone nodded slowly. I'm not going to tell anyone about this, Doc. But I'm curious why a state champion shooter enlisted as a medic and never mentioned she could probably outshoot half the company. Sloan looked at her hands. Steady hands. Surgeon's hands. Her father had always said she had a gift for precision. Whether it was placing a bullet or placing a suture, the principle was the same. Control, focus, breathing. I promised my mother, she said quietly, at my father's grave, that I would never touch a weapon again. He died from lung cancer caused by burn pit exposure during his deployments. It took 4 years after Somalia to kill him, but the war got him in the end. She didn't want that life for me. But you enlisted anyway. I enlisted as a medic, to save lives, not take them. That's different. Stone considered this. Is it? It has to be. He picked up the laptop and tucked it under his arm. For what it's worth, Doc, I think your father would understand the choice you made. Medicine is a different kind of service, but it's still service. After he left, Sloan sat very still in the empty aid station. Her father's face in that photograph kept surfacing in her mind. The pride, the love, the hope that his daughter would do something better with her life than he'd done with his. She'd kept her promise for 8 years. Through college, through basic training, through medic school, and this entire deployment. 8 years of being who her mother needed her to be, instead of who her father had trained her to become. The weight of that promise felt heavier today than it had yesterday. The patrol briefing happened at 0500 hours. Sloan attended because she was still technically assigned to the squad, even if Webb had decided she wouldn't be leaving the wire anymore. She listened to the route description, the threat assessment, the contingency plans. Standard presence patrol through a neighborhood that had been quiet for the last 3 weeks. Low risk, routine. The kind of mission that everyone had run 100 times, which meant it was exactly the kind of mission where things went wrong. Hawkins checked his M24 one more time, running through his pre-combat ritual with the focus of someone who knew that attention to detail kept people alive. Webb briefed the vehicle assignments. Stone quietly made sure everyone had the right radio frequencies. Reed caught Sloan's eye and gave her a thumbs up. The kid had recovered fully from the heat stroke and was cleared to return to duty. She'd made him drink enough water over the last week to float a small boat. You staying back at the aid station, Doc, Reed asked. That's the plan. Seems wrong. You're our medic. You should be with us. Battalion makes those decisions, not me. Webb overheard and frowned. Reed, focus on your job. Doc Merrick will be here when we get back if anyone needs her. If. That word carried a lot of weight. The patrol rolled out at 0600. 6 vehicles, 24 soldiers. Sloan watched from the aid station as the convoy disappeared through the FOB gates into the Iraqi dawn. She tried to focus on restocking supplies, checking expiration dates, updating medical records, all the administrative tasks that kept a combat aid station running. The radio chatter was routine for the first 30 minutes. Position reports, traffic conditions, the normal rhythm of a standard patrol. Then everything changed. Contact, IED, strike on lead vehicle. Multiple casualties. Need QRF and medevac now. Sloan was on her feet before the transmission finished aid bag already on her shoulders. She ran for the command post where the radios were her healing leg forgotten in the spike of adrenaline. Webb's voice came through, tight with stress, but controlled. Sniper fire from elevated position. We're pinned down. Can't reach the wounded in the kill zone. Another voice, someone younger, panic creeping in. They're bleeding out, Sarge. We gotta get to them. Hawkins, I can see the shooter, but I can't get an angle. He's 3 stories up, maybe 680 meters out. I need to reposition, but the moment I move, A crack of gunfire cut through the transmission. Hawkins is hit. Shooter got him in the shoulder. He can't return fire. Sloan's hands clenched into fists. 680 meters. Elevated position, pinned patrol. Wounded soldiers bleeding in the open while a sniper kept everyone away from them. The quick reaction force was scrambling, but they were 20 minutes out. Medevac wouldn't come in until the area was secure and the sniper neutralized. 20 minutes. Those soldiers didn't have 20 minutes. She keyed her radio. This is Doc Merrick at the aid station. What's Hawkins' status? Stone's voice answered calm, despite the chaos. Through and through on the shoulder. He's stable, but he can't hold a rifle. Merrick, we need that counter-sniper capability, or we're going to lose people in that kill zone. What about other marksmen? Nobody else qualified on the M24 in this element. It's just Hawk, and he's done. Sloan looked at her hands. Steady, always steady, the same hands that had saved Reed from heat stroke, that had stopped Jensen from bleeding out. That had treated 217 casualties in 8 months without losing a single patient who reached her alive. Her father's hands. Ranger hands that he'd trained from the time she was 11 years old. She'd made a promise to her mother. Never touch a weapon again. Never walk the path that had killed her father from the inside. She'd kept that promise for 8 years. But her father had also taught her something else. Something that lived deeper than promises. The fundamental equation that defined a soldier's duty. You use the tools you have to save the lives in front of you. And right now, soldiers were dying because they didn't have the tool they needed. Sloan made her decision. She ran. The convoy had stopped 3 kilometers from the FOB. Sloan commandeered a Humvee and its driver, a specialist from the motor pool who looked terrified but didn't argue with the medic's intensity. The drive took 4 minutes that felt like 40. She arrived to chaos. Vehicles in defensive positions. Soldiers behind cover. The crack of incoming sniper fire keeping everyone's heads down. Webb coordinating over the radio, his voice showing the strain of command while wounded men bled and he couldn't reach them. Sloan grabbed her aid bag and moved in a low crouch to Webb's position behind an armored vehicle. He looked at her with shock and anger. "Merrick, what the hell are you doing here? I ordered you to stay at the FOB. 2 soldiers are dying in that kill zone, Staff Sergeant. I'm their medic. I should be here. You can't help them if you can't reach them." "That sniper!" Another crack of gunfire punctuated his words. "He's got us pinned down completely." Stone appeared beside them, his face grim. "Hawkins is conscious, but his shoulder's torn up. Can't even hold his sidearm." Through the gap between vehicles, Sloan could see the 2 wounded soldiers, maybe 40 meters away. They'd taken cover behind a low wall, but they weren't moving much. The spreading dark stains on their uniforms told the story. Bleeding, probably arterial from the volume. Minutes, not hours. Reed was pressed against the same vehicle they were using for cover. The young private's face had gone pale. "Doc, we gotta do something. That's Corporal Jensen. He's gonna die if, I know, Reed." She knew. She could see it happening. Could calculate the blood loss, the shock setting, and the cascading organ failure that would follow. Could see it all with perfect clarity and couldn't do a damn thing about it because a hostile shooter 680 meters away had superior position and was keeping them all pinned down. Unless. Sloan looked at Webb, then at Stone, then at the M24 rifle lying next to Hawkins, who sat slumped against a tire with his shoulder wrapped in bloody bandages and paint etched across his face. "Staff Sergeant," she said quietly, "I can make that shot." The words fell into sudden silence. Webb stared at her. "What? The sniper. 680 meters, 3rd floor window, elevated position. I can make that shot." "Merrick, you're a medic, not a..." "My father was Wyatt Merrick, 75th Ranger Regiment. He served in Somalia during Operation Gothic Serpent in 1993. When he came back in 1994, he taught me to shoot from age 11 until he died of lung cancer in 1998. I was 16. I was Montana State Champion that same year. I can make this shot, Staff Sergeant. I can neutralize that threat so we can reach our wounded." The crack of another incoming round made everyone flinch. Stone met her eyes. There was recognition there. He'd known somehow, had suspected since he found that article. Hawkins spoke through gritted teeth. "Doc, that's 680 meters, in this wind, against an elevated target who knows what he's doing. That's not..." "I know what it is, Corporal." Sloan's voice carried absolute certainty. "And I know what I can do." Webb looked at the wounded soldiers, looked at his watch, looked at Sloan's face and saw something there that made him pause. "You sure about this?" "Yes, Staff Sergeant. You miss, you get back to medical work immediately. We'll figure something else out." "I won't miss." She said it with such quiet conviction that nobody argued. Stone handed her Hawkins M24 rifle without a word. The weapon was heavier than she remembered, but the weight distribution was familiar. 30 pounds of steel and polymer and scope optics. Her hands knew exactly where to go. Muscle memory older than her enlistment papers. She moved to a position with a clear line of sight to the target building. Set the bipod, dropped into prone position. The old familiar stance that her body remembered even after 8 years. Through the scope, she could see the window where muzzle flashes had been appearing. 3rd floor, 680 meters according to her rangefinder. Wind maybe 4 miles per hour from left to right based on the dust movement and heat shimmer. Her breathing slowed automatically. 4 count in through the nose. Hold for 7, 8 count out through the mouth. Wyatt's teaching echoed from years past, patient and steady. Control the breath, control the heart rate. Let everything else fall away until there's just you and the target and the space between. Her pulse dropped. 60 beats per minute, 55, 50. The crosshair settled on the window. Sloane's finger rested lightly on the trigger. Not pulling, just touching. Feeling the break point. Knowing exactly how much pressure would send the round downrange. The enemy sniper moved into view, just a silhouette against the lighter interior of the building. But enough. More than enough. She began the squeeze. Slow, steady, the way her father had taught her a lifetime ago. The rifle fired. Through the scope, she watched the bullet impact 8 inches to the left of where she'd aimed. The figure in the window ducked back into cover unharmed. She'd missed. Reed's voice quiet with disappointment. Shit, Hawkins. I told you, Kem. Wind shifted. Sloane said, her voice perfectly calm. She was already chambering another round. Adjusting. Webb Merrick, we don't have time for a 10-second staff sergeant. She watched the wind indicators again. The dust patterns had changed. The heat shimmer showed different currents. The wind had picked up slightly and shifted direction by maybe 5 degrees. She compensated in her head, adjusted the scope fractionally, settled her breathing again. The enemy sniper reappeared in the window, probably thinking he was safe after she'd missed. Sloane's finger found the trigger. This time when she squeezed, she knew the shot was good before the rifle even fired. Felt it in her bones. The perfect alignment of breath and heartbeat in physics. The rifle cracked. Through the scope, she watched the figure in the window jerk backward and disappear from view. The incoming fire stopped. Complete silence for 3 seconds. Then Webb's voice quiet with something that might have been awe. Hostile sniper down. All elements, the area is clear. Get those wounded soldiers to Doc Merrick now. Sloane safed the rifle and set it aside. She was already moving the medical bag in hand, running toward the 2 soldiers who had maybe 3 minutes left to live if she didn't get to them immediately. Behind her, she heard Reed's stunned whisper. Did that just happen? Stone's reply, dry as dust. Yeah, Reed, that just happened. But Sloane wasn't listening anymore. She had soldiers to save. That's what she did. That's who she was. The rifle had just been a tool to make that possible. Sloane reached the first wounded soldier in 12 seconds. Corporal Jensen had taken shrapnel to his thigh, and the blood loss was catastrophic. The kind of wound that gave you minutes to work with, not hours. Her hands moved on autopilot. Tourniquet high and tight above the wound. Combat gauze packed into the torn flesh. 4th line started in the left antecubital vein. Morphine administered. Documentation scrawled on the card attached to Jensen's vest. She worked without speaking, her focus absolute. The same focus she'd had looking through that rifle scope 30 seconds ago. Control. Precision. No wasted movement. The second casualty had taken a round through the shoulder that had nicked his subclavian artery. Specialist Brooks was already in shock, his skin clammy and pale. Sloane got pressure on the wound while Reed fumbled with an IV kit. Reed breathed. You know this. Her voice cut through his panic. Start the line. I need both hands here. The young private steadied and got the IV going on the second try. Learning, 10 minutes later, both casualties were stabilized and loaded onto the medevac that had finally been cleared to land. Sloane watched the Black Hawk lift off and allowed herself one slow breath before turning back to the squad. They were all staring at her. Not the usual look she got as the medic. This was different. Uncertainty. Reassessment. Like they were seeing her for the first time and didn't quite know what they were looking at. Hawkins sat propped against a vehicle tire, his shoulder wrapped in pressure bandages. His M24 rifle lay beside him. He looked at it, then at Sloane, then back at the rifle. Doc. His voice was tight with pain and something else. Where the hell did you learn to shoot like that? Sloane picked up her medical bag. Montana, my father. That was 680 meters in wind against an elevated target. Hawkins shook his head slowly. I've been shooting that rifle for 6 years and I'm not sure I could have made that shot. You were wounded, I wasn't. That's not, he stopped. Tried again. You adjusted after the first miss. Mid-engagement. How did you, Phantom? The wind shifted. I compensated. She said it like it was obvious. Like anyone would have done the same thing. Stone appeared at her elbow with that quiet way he had of materializing without making sound. Let me see Hawkins' shoulder, Doc. She examined the wound while Stone watched her face instead of her hands. The bullet had gone clean through the trapezius muscle without hitting bone or major vessels. Painful but not serious. Hawkins would heal. You'll live, Corporal, she told him, but you're off duty for 2 weeks minimum. 2 weeks, Doc. I'm the squad's designated marksman. Were, Stone corrected quietly. Past tense. At least until that shoulder heals. Reed had been silent since the shooting stopped. Now he moved closer, his young face caught between awe and confusion. Doc Merrick, I don't understand. You're a medic. You're not supposed to. I mean, we didn't even know you could. He trailed off, unable to articulate what everyone was thinking. Staff Sergeant Webb stood 20 feet away, radio in hand, concluding his after-action report to the command post. When he finished, he walked over to Sloan with measured steps. His face gave away nothing. Merrick, with me. She followed him to the far side of the vehicle convoy, out of earshot of the others. Webb crossed his good arm over his sling and studied her for a long moment. I need to know where a combat medic learned precision marksmanship at that level. I told you, Staff Sergeant. My father taught you. Right, I got that part. Webb's tone sharpened slightly. What I didn't get was that your father was apparently running a sniper school out of Montana. That wasn't beginner shooting, Merrick. That was expert-level precision under combat stress. Sloan met his gaze steadily. My father was Wyatt Merrick's 75th Ranger Regiment. He served in Somalia during Operation Gothic Serpent. After he came back in 1994, he taught me to shoot from age 11 until he died when I was 16. That was 1998. And you never mentioned this because I'm a medic, not a shooter. I enlisted to save lives, not take them. You just took one. To save two. The words came out harder than she intended. That sniper was going to kill Jensen and Brooks. I had the capability to stop it. So I did. Webb's expression shifted slightly. Not quite approval, but something in that direction. Your personnel file doesn't mention any of this. There's nothing to mention. I'm not weapons qualified beyond basic rifle. I have no formal sniper training. What my father taught me was before I enlisted. It's not relevant to my MOS. Not relevant? Webb almost laughed. Merrick, you just made one of the most difficult shots I've seen in 20 years of service. Under pressure. With a weapon you supposedly haven't touched in 8 years. And you think that's not relevant? I think my job is to be a medic. The shooting was necessary in the moment. It won't be necessary again. You can't possibly believe that. Sloan said nothing. She wanted to believe it. Needed to believe it. Because if she acknowledged that her father's training was relevant, that those skills might be needed again, then she had to confront the promise she'd made to her mother. Never touch a weapon again. Never become what destroyed her father. She'd broken that promise today. For good reasons, yes. To save lives, but broken nonetheless. Webb seemed to sense her internal conflict. His voice softened fractionally. Look, I'm not trying to jam you up. What you did today saved lives. Jensen and Brooks are alive because you made that shot. But command is going to have questions, and I need better answers than my dad taught me. What do you want me to say, Staff Sergeant? The truth, all of it. So she told him about growing up on a Montana ranch, about a father who came back from Somalia in 1994 with nightmares that never fully went away, about learning to shoot from age 11 onward, the same way some kids learn piano with patient repetition and exacting standards. She told him about the competitions, the state championship in June 1998 when she was 16, her father's pride in her shooting, and his quiet hope when she chose to pursue medicine. She told him about the cancer diagnosis 2 months after that championship, the rapid decline, the funeral in August 1998, the promise her mother extracted at the graveside that same day. When she finished, Webb was quiet for several heartbeats. Your mother made you promise never to touch a gun again. Yes, Staff Sergeant. And you kept that promise for 8 years. Through basic, through medic training, through 8 months of deployment in a combat zone. Yes, Staff Sergeant. That's, Webb shook his head. That's either incredibly disciplined or incredibly stubborn. Probably both. And today you broke that promise. Yes, Staff Sergeant. Webb looked back toward where the wounded had been lying. I'm not going to tell you that was wrong, Merrick. You made a tactical decision in a crisis situation and it worked. 2 soldiers are alive because of it. That matters. I know. But this isn't over. Command is going to want to verify your capabilities. They're going to want to know if today was a fluke or if you can replicate it. Sloan's jaw tightened. I'm a medic. You're a medic who can shoot. Apparently very well. The Army has a use for that combination. The Army already has designated marksmen. It doesn't need me doing something I'm not trained for. Hawkins is down for 2 weeks minimum. Reed is too inexperienced. We're a squad without counter-sniper capability in an AO where snipers are a persistent threat. Webb held her gaze. Like it or not, Doc, you just became tactically relevant in a way that goes beyond medicine. He left her standing there while he went to coordinate vehicle recovery. Sloan closed her eyes for a moment. Her hands were steady, but her chest felt tight. She could still feel the rifle's recoil against her shoulder. Could still see the crosshairs settling on target. Could still hear Wyatt's instruction, guiding her breath and trigger control. Sloan shooting is just applied physics and breath control. You're good at both. But remember, a rifle is a tool. Sometimes you need it, sometimes you don't. The wisdom is knowing which is which. Today she'd needed it. The question was whether she'd need it again. The convoy rolled back to FOB Falcon an hour later. Sloan retreated to the aid station and tried to lose herself in routine. Restocking supplies, updating medical records, cleaning equipment. The familiar rhythms that had defined her deployment. But she couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on her. Everywhere she went, soldiers watched, whispered. Word had spread with the speed of military gossip. The medic who made the impossible shot. She hated it. That night, Stone found her in the aid station after dark. He set his laptop on her desk without preamble and angled the screen toward her. The same photograph from before. 16-year-old Sloan with her rifle. Her father's hand on her shoulder. Both of them smiling in June 1998. "You've been sitting on this information for 3 days and didn't say anything," Sloan asked. "Wasn't my business to share, but after today, I figured you might want to see it. Remember who you were before you promised to be someone else." She traced a finger over her father's face on the screen. Wyatt Merrick had been a hard man, shaped by hard experiences, but he'd been a good father. Patient, demanding but fair. He taught her to shoot the way he did everything with precision and purpose. "He was Somalia," Stone said. "Mogadishu, right?" "Yes, October 1993. He came back in early 94. That was a bad day. It was a lot of bad days for him afterward. He came back different," my mother said. "Functional but haunted." Sloan closed the laptop gently. The nightmares never really stopped. The hypervigilance, the way he'd flinch at loud sounds. Classic PTSD, but he refused treatment. A lot of that generation did. The lung cancer from burn pit exposure almost came as a relief. He could fight that, had an enemy he could see. She looked up at Stone. It took 4 years after Somalia to kill him, but the war got him in the end. My mother blamed the military for his death, not the cancer, the military. She said it took the man she married and left her with someone who only looked like him. "Is that why you promised never to carry a weapon?" "She couldn't save my father, but she thought she would save me from becoming him." Stone settled into the chair across from her. "Can I ask you something? You're going to anyway. Today when you picked up that rifle, did it feel like breaking a promise or did it feel like coming home?" Sloan was quiet for a long time. That was the question, wasn't it? The one she'd been avoiding since the moment she'd squeezed that trigger. "Both," she admitted finally. "It felt like both." "That's honest anyway." "What do you think I should do, Sergeant?" Stone raised an eyebrow. "You asking my advice? You seem to have opinions on everything else." "Fair enough," he leaned back. "I think your father gave you a gift. Whether you wanted it or not, whether it fits your plan or not, you have capabilities that most soldiers don't. The question isn't whether you should use them. You already answered that today. The question is how you integrate them with who you've chosen to be. A medic. A medic who can shoot. That's not a contradiction, Doc. That's a force multiplier." Before Sloan could respond, Webb appeared in the doorway. "Merrick, need you at the command post." She followed him across the FOB to the headquarters building. Inside, Captain Reeves waited with another officer Sloan didn't recognize. The stranger wore major's insignia and had the weathered look of someone who'd spent years in special operations. "Sergeant Merrick," Captain Reeves said. "This is Major Holland from Battalion. He has some questions about today's engagement." Sloan came to attention. "Yes, sir." Major Holland gestured for her to sit. "Relax, Sergeant. This isn't an investigation. I just want to understand what happened." He asked her to walk through the engagement step by step. The decision to take the shot, the miss, the adjustment, the second shot. She kept her answers technical and precise. When she finished, Holland leaned back in his chair. "Staff Sergeant Webb speaks highly of your medical skills. Says you're the best combat medic he's worked with in 20 years. The staff sergeant is generous, sir. He also says you learned to shoot from your father. Wyatt Merrick, 75th Rangers." "Yes, sir. I served with your father in Somalia. Different unit, but we crossed paths." Holland's expression softened slightly. "He was a hell of a soldier. I was sorry to hear about his passing." Sloan's throat tightened. "Thank you, sir. He died in 98, is that right? Exposure-related illness from downrange. Lung cancer from burn pits." It took 4 years after he came home to kill me, but Somalia got him in the end. Holland nodded slowly. A lot of good men died slow deaths from that deployment. I'm sorry. He pulled a folder from his briefcase and opened it. I've been reviewing your personnel file. Top marks in every medical training course. Exemplary performance reviews. 217 casualties treated in 8 months with 0 preventable deaths. He looked up. That's an impressive record, Sergeant. I'm just doing my job, sir. You're doing it better than most. He closed the folder, which brings me to why I'm here. We have a problem in this AO. Enemy snipers are getting more sophisticated, better trained, better equipped. Our counter-sniper capabilities haven't kept pace. Sloan saw where this was going and didn't like it. Sir, I'm a combat medic, not a designated marksman. I'm aware, but you've demonstrated capabilities that we need. I'd like you to consider expanding your role. Sir, with respect, I enlisted to save lives, not to tome. You saved 2 lives today specifically because you took one. Holland interrupted gently. I understand your hesitation. I understand you made a promise to your mother, but war doesn't care about our promises, Sergeant. It cares about capabilities and mission requirements. Major, I'm not asking you to become a sniper. I'm asking you to be what you already are, a combat medic with an additional skill set that can be called on when tactically necessary. He leaned forward. Think of it as an expansion of your medical mission. Sometimes the best medicine is preventing casualties before they happen. That logic sounded disturbingly similar to what she told herself when she picked up the rifle. I need to think about this, sir. That's fair. Take 24 hours. We'll talk again tomorrow. Holland stood. One more thing, Sergeant. Your father would be proud of what you did today. I'm certain of that. After the officers left, Webb walked Sloan back toward the aid station. They moved in silence for a while. You going to take the Major's offer? Webb asked. I don't know. For what it's worth, I think you should. Why? Because you're wasted just doing medical. You're good at it, don't get me wrong. But you could be exceptional at this hybrid role, medicine and marksmanship. The complete package. Sloan stopped walking. Staff Sergeant, do you know what happened to my father after Somalia? PTSD? He couldn't sleep without nightmares, couldn't go to crowded places, couldn't hear fireworks without diving for cover. The Rangers broke him piece by piece until there wasn't enough left to put back together. She met Webb's eyes. That's what happens when you spend years being the person who takes lives. Even for good reasons. It destroys you from the inside. Your father was a different generation, different support systems, different understanding of combat stress. Or maybe it's just what war does to people who are good at killing. Webb was quiet for a moment. Is that what you think you'd become? I think I don't want to find out. She left him standing there and returned to the aid station alone. Sleep didn't come easily that night. Sloan lay on her cot staring at the ceiling, replaying the shot in her mind. The rifle's weight, the scope's clarity, the moment of perfect alignment before she squeezed the trigger. It had felt right. That was what scared her. Healing felt like work, difficult but necessary. Shooting had felt natural, effortless, like slipping into a well-worn jacket that she'd forgotten she owned. Her father's jacket. She must have dozed eventually because she woke to someone shaking her shoulder. Stone stood over her cot, his expression serious. Doc, command post, now. She pulled on her boots and followed him into the pre-dawn darkness. The command post was crowded with officers and senior NCOs, all focused on a radio transmission. Multiple casualties. We need counter-sniper support immediately. QRF is inbound, but the shooter has us completely pinned. Webb saw Sloan and gestured her over. Different sector. Squad got hit during a dawn patrol. Enemy sniper in an elevated position. Sound familiar? Where's their designated marksman? In the hospital with appendicitis. They don't have counter-sniper capability. Sloan felt the weight of everyone's eyes on her. How far out are they? 12 kilometers. QRF will get there in 15 minutes, but the shooter might displace before then. On the radio, someone screamed. The transmission cut off. Major Holland appeared beside her. Sergeant Merrick. I know I said you could have 24 hours to think, but those soldiers don't have 24 hours. She looked at the map showing the patrol's location, then at the faces around her, then at her own hands steady despite everything. Years of her father's instructions surfacing instinctively. A rifle is a tool. Sometimes you need it, sometimes you don't. The wisdom is knowing which is which. I'll need Hawkins M24, she said quietly, and a vehicle that can move fast. Stone was already moving toward the armory. 30 minutes later, Sloan lay prone on a rooftop 800 meters from where a squad was pinned down by sniper fire. The M24 was braced against sandbags. The scope showed her target window with perfect clarity. The enemy shooter was good, professional. He'd chosen his position well and was using disciplined fire to keep the Americans suppressed. But Sloan had been trained by an Army Ranger who'd survived Mogadishu, who'd taught her that shooting was just applied physics and breath control and patience. She had all three. The crosshairs settled, her breathing slowed, her finger found the trigger. This time there was no hesitation, no moral quandary, just cold tactical calculus. She squeezed. The rifle barked once. Through the scope, she watched the enemy sniper collapse. Hostile down, she reported into her radio. Area secure. Webb's voice came back. Copy. Well done, Doc. Get back to base. Sloan safed the rifle and began breaking down her position. Her hands were steady. Her breathing was normal. She felt nothing about taking a life except the clinical satisfaction of a job done correctly. That scared her more than the shooting itself. Back at the FOB, Major Holland was waiting. Sergeant Merrick, I think we need to have that conversation now. She followed him to a quiet corner of the command post. Before you say anything, Holland began, I want you to read this. He handed her a sealed envelope. The handwriting on the front made her freeze. To the commanding officer of my daughter Sloan if she ever enlists. Her father's handwriting. Sloan's hands trembled slightly as she broke the seal. The letter was dated February 14th, 1998, just weeks before he died. She read it in silence, aware of Holland watching her. The words blurred slightly as she reached the end. Her father's last message written when he knew he was dying, but hoped she'd choose a different path. He'd known she might break the promise, had given her permission, had understood that sometimes a healer needed to fight. When she looked up, her eyes were dry, but her jaw was clenched tight. My father always understood more than he said, she managed. He understood you, Holland said gently, better than you understand yourself, maybe. He knew you'd try to be something different than him, but he also knew that if you ever had to use what he taught you, it would be for the right reasons. Sloan folded the letter carefully and put it in her pocket. What do you need from me, sir? Proof that today wasn't luck, that you can replicate what you did under different conditions. A test, if you want to call it that. Windharm, tomorrow, 1100 hours. We'll set up a range scenario. If you pass, we create a new designation for you. Combat Medical Specialist. Medic first, but qualified and authorized to engage when tactically necessary. Sloan thought about the promise to her mother, about 8 years of keeping that promise, about 2 separate squads that were alive today because she'd broken it. I'll be there, sir. The next morning, half the FOB turned out to watch. Webb had set up targets at various ranges, 300 meters, 600, 900, 1150, different elevations, different wind conditions, different levels of difficulty. Stone handed her the M24 without comment. Reed watched with obvious anxiety. Hawkins sat to the side with his injured shoulder, his expression unreadable. Sloan checked the rifle, chambered around, settled into position. The 300-meter shot was easy. Center mass, 600 required wind compensation, still well within her capabilities. Another perfect shot. 900 tested her ability to read mirage and heat shimmer. She took her time, calculated carefully, and put the round exactly where it needed to go. The 1150-meter target was the real test. Long range, variable wind, upward angle, the kind of shot that separated competent marksmen from exceptional ones. Sloan studied the conditions. Wind flags showed gusting between 8 and 12 miles per hour, shifting direction every 30 seconds. The heat shimmer indicated thermal updrafts that would affect the bullet's trajectory. She did the math in her head. Elevation adjustment, wind drift calculation. Coriolis effect at this range became relevant. All the physics her father had drilled into her years ago in Montana. She settled her breathing, let her heart rate drop, found that perfect stillness where nothing existed except her, the rifle, and the target. The shot broke clean. 4 seconds later, the target spotter called out, "Center mass, dead center." The watching soldiers erupted in conversation. Sloan safed the rifle and stood her face neutral, despite the pounding of her heart. Major Holland approached with Webb and the battalion commander. "Sergeant Merrick," the colonel said, "that was the most impressive display of marksmanship I've seen from someone without formal sniper training. I'm authorizing the creation of a new MOS designation effective immediately. Combat Medical Specialist. You'll be the first." "Sir, I'd prefer to remain designated as a combat medic." The colonel raised an eyebrow. "Why? Because that's who I am. I'm a medic who can shoot when necessary, not a shooter who knows medicine. The distinction matters. The colonel considered this. Fair enough. You'll retain your medic designation with a rider qualification for precision marksmanship. How's that? That works, sir. After the officers left, the squad gathered around her. Reed looked at her with something approaching worship. Hawkins grudgingly nodded approval. Stone just smiled his quiet smile. Webb pulled her aside. You proved your point, Merrick. You can shoot. Question is, can you live with what that means? Sloane touched the letter in her pocket. Her father's words giving her permission to be both things at once. Healer and warrior. Medicine and marksmanship. I guess I'll find out, Staff Sergeant. I guess you will. That night, Sloane called her mother on the satellite phone. It took 20 minutes to get through. Mom, I need to tell you something. She explained everything. The firefight, the promise she'd broken, the second shot, the test. Her voice stayed steady through all of it. When she finished, there was a long silence on the other end. Then her mother's voice, thick with tears but not angry. Sloane, honey, your father's letter reached me too. He had the Army send me a copy in February '98, right before he died. He wrote you too. He knew you'd try to keep your promise, and he knew I'd hold you to it out of fear. But he also knew that if you ever broke it, it would be because you had to, because someone's life depended on it. Her mother's voice softened. He gave us both permission 8 years ago, sweetheart, to let you be who you needed to be. I was just too scared to see it until now. I miss him, Mom. I know. So do I, but I see him in you. Not the broken parts, the good parts, the strong parts, the parts that knew when to heal and when to fight. After they said goodbye, Sloane sat in the quiet of the aid station with her father's letter on her lap. She was a medic. That would never change. But she was also her father's daughter. And sometimes being both was exactly what the mission required. 3 weeks after the marksmanship demonstration, late September 2006, the mission briefing happened at 0400 hours. Sloane sat in the operations center with 15 other soldiers, all focused on the grainy satellite images Major Holland was projecting onto the wall. High-value target meeting scheduled for today at 1400 hours. Compound location here approximately 12 kilometers west of our position. Holland tapped the screen. Intelligence indicates civilian hostages are being held inside. 2 confirmed, possibly more. At least 1 is wounded and in critical condition. Webb leaned forward. What's the tactical situation? Compound is defended by an estimated 12 to 15 hostile fighters. Well-armed, well-trained. The structure itself provides excellent defensive positions with interlocking fields of fire. Any direct assault will result in significant casualties, both friendly and civilian. Stone studied the overhead imagery. What's the place, sir? Holland switched to a topographical map. We insert a sniper team here on this ridgeline, 850 meters to the compound with clear sight lines to all approaches. The sniper eliminates external security at the moment the assault element breaches, creates confusion, reduces resistance, maximizes our chances of extracting the hostages alive. Who's the sniper? Hawkins asked. His shoulder had healed enough for light duty, but he couldn't handle the M24's recoil yet. Holland looked directly at Sloane. Sergeant Merrick. The room went quiet. Sir, Sloane said carefully, if one of the hostages is critically wounded, they'll need immediate trauma care. The golden hour starts when the injury occurs, I know, which is why you'll be pulling double duty. Holland brought up another image. After you provide overwatch and eliminate the external threats, you move to the compound. The assault team will secure the structure, but they'll need a medic immediately for the wounded hostage. That's you. Reed raised his hand hesitantly. Sir, that's a lot to ask one person to do. Sniper support and trauma surgery. It is, but Sergeant Merrick has proven she can handle both roles. And frankly, we don't have anyone else with her unique combination of skills. Holland's expression was serious. I won't lie to you, Sergeant. This mission is high risk. You'll be operating alone for the sniper phase, then integrating with the assault element under fire. If you're not comfortable with it, I need to know now. Sloane thought about the wounded hostage. Critical condition. Hours or maybe minutes from death. Someone who needed a medic more than they needed another rifleman. But they also needed someone to clear the way, to make the rescue possible. She touched the letter in her pocket. Her father's words from February 1998 had become a talisman of sorts over the past 3 weeks. I can do it, sir. You sure? Yes, sir, but I need to streamline my loadout. Can't carry full medical gear and sniper equipment. I'll need to prioritize trauma supplies only. Holland nodded. Work with Stone to configure your kit. We move out at 0600. The next 2 hours were spent in meticulous preparation. Sloan went through her medical bag 3 times, removing anything that wasn't essential for immediate trauma care. Hemostatic agents, surgical clamps, antibiotics, morphine, IV fluids, airway management supplies. Everything focused on keeping someone alive long enough to reach a hospital. Stone helped her rig the gear for rapid access. "You've done this before," he observed. "Configured a bag this specifically." "My father taught me." He said the difference between a good medic and a great one was knowing what you'd actually need versus what you might need. Weight matters. Speed matters. Precision in your supplies is the same as precision with a rifle. Smart man, your father. He had his moments. She checked the M24 next, cleaned and oiled, scope calibrated, ammunition verified. The rifle had become familiar over the past weeks. Not comfortable exactly, but known. An extension of capability rather than a foreign object. Reed appeared in the doorway of the supply room. "Doc, can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "When you shoot someone, how do you deal with it? After, I mean." Sloan looked up from the rifle. Reed's face showed genuine confusion. The kid was trying to understand something that didn't have easy answers. "I don't shoot people, Reed. I eliminate threats to my patients. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Has to be. Otherwise, I couldn't do my job." She went back to checking her equipment. A surgeon cuts into people, opens them up, removes parts, rearranges things. That would be assault anywhere else. But in an operating room with the right training and the right reasons, it's medicine. Same principle. That's a hell of a way to think about it. It's the only way I can think about it and still sleep at night. Reed was quiet for a moment. Then, "For what it's worth, Doc, I'm glad you're on our side." After he left, Sloan sat alone with her equipment. The rifle, the medical bag, 2 different tools for 2 different purposes that somehow had to work together seamlessly. Her father had been right about a lot of things, but he'd been wrong about one critical detail. Using these skills didn't destroy you from the inside. What destroyed you was using them for the wrong reasons. Without purpose, without control. She had both. The insertion began at dawn. 2 vehicles carried the assault element toward the target compound, while Sloan and Stone moved to the ridgeline on foot. The approach took 90 minutes of careful movement through terrain that offered minimal cover. They established the sniper position on a rocky outcrop that provided perfect elevation and concealment, 850 meters to the target. Stone set up as her spotter while Sloan configured the M24. Through the high-powered scope, she could observe the compound clearly. Guard rotations, defensive positions, the layout of the structure itself. She identified 3 critical targets: 2 guards in elevated positions who could direct fire on the assault team, 1 guard near the entrance to the building where the hostages were likely held. All 3 needed to be eliminated within seconds to prevent coordinated resistance. "Winds variable," Stone observed, reading the indicators. 8 to 12 miles per hour quartering from the right. "I see it." "Assault element reports they're in position. Waiting on your signal." Sloan settled into her breathing rhythm. 4 count in, hold for 7, 8 count out. Her heart rate dropped to 55 beats per minute. The scope's reticle found the first target, guard in the north tower, 870 meters. She calculated the wind drift and elevation. Stone's voice was quiet in her ear. "Assault team is go in 60 seconds. Copy. 50 seconds. She reviewed the engagement sequence in her mind. Target 1 in the north tower. Shift to target 2 in the south tower. Then target 3 at the entrance. Maximum time 8 seconds for all 3 shots. 30 seconds. Her finger rested lightly on the trigger. Breathing slowed further. Everything narrowed to the space between her and the first target. 10 seconds. The first guard moved into perfect position. Sloan squeezed the trigger with the same gentle pressure she used for surgical sutures. The rifle cracked. Through the scope, she watched the guard drop. She chambered another round without conscious thought. Muscle memory from thousands of repetitions on her father's ranch. The scope found target 2. Second shot, clean impact. Target down. Third guard was moving, alerted by the sound of suppressed fire. Sloan led him by 18 inches, accounting for his movement in the wind. Third shot. The guard fell. 3 targets down, she reported. "Assault element, you're clear to breach." Stone was already packing the spotting scope. "Time to move, Doc. They'll need you inside in about 90 seconds. Sloan broke down the sniper position and secured the M24 to her pack. Then she ran, 850 meters in full combat load while carrying both rifle and medical gear. Her lungs burned and her legs screamed, but she pushed through it. This was what all those pre-dawn runs had been for. Building the endurance to be 2 things at once. She reached the compound perimeter as the assault team breached the main entrance. Explosions, gunfire, shouted commands, the controlled chaos of a tactical operation. Webb's voice on the radio. Building secure. 2 hostages located, 1 critical. We need Doc Merrick now. Sloan sprinted across the compound courtyard. Reed provided cover from a doorway, his rifle tracking for threats. She gave him a nod as she passed. Inside the building, the assault team had cleared 3 rooms. 2 hostile fighters lay dead. The rest had fled or surrendered. In the back room, she found the hostages. An adult male, mid-40s, unconscious and pale. Obvious gunshot wound to the abdomen with significant blood loss. Classic signs of hemorrhagic shock. A young girl, maybe 8 years old, huddled in the corner with shrapnel wounds to her arms and legs. Conscious but terrified. Sloan dropped to her knees beside the adult male and switched modes instantly. No more shooter, all medic now. I need light here, and clear me a space to work. Hawkins, who'd come with the assault element despite his healing shoulder, positioned himself with a flashlight. Webb moved the child to a safer corner where another soldier kept her calm. Sloan's hands moved with practiced precision. She cut away the man's shirt and assessed the wound, entry point below the ribs. Exit wound in the lower back. The bullet had likely nicked the femoral artery and possibly damaged the liver. Class 4 hemorrhagic shock. BP is dropping fast. Starting transfusion. She got an IV line started while simultaneously applying direct pressure to the wound. The bleeding was massive. Her hands were covered in blood within seconds, but they stayed steady. Combat gauze packed into the wound cavity, hemostatic agents to promote clotting, pressure bandages. She worked without pause, moving through the protocols with the efficiency of someone who'd done this too many times to count. The man's pulse was thready. His skin had gone gray. He was minutes from death. Stay with me, Sloan said, though she wasn't sure if he could hear. You're not dying today, not on my watch. She performed an emergency cricothyrotomy to secure his airway. Her surgical training from medical school, combined with 8 months of combat experience, made her fingers certain even in the chaotic environment. 10 minutes later, his vital signs had stabilized enough for transport. Not good, but no longer actively dying. She turned her attention to the child. The shrapnel wounds were painful but not life-threatening. Sloan cleaned them, applied antibiotic ointment, and wrapped them in sterile bandages while speaking softly in the few words of Arabic she'd learned. The girl's terrified expression softened slightly. Stone appeared in the doorway. Medevac inbound. 2 minutes. Tell them we have 1 critical, 1 stable. The critical needs immediate surgery or he won't make it to Germany. The Black Hawk arrived exactly on schedule. Sloan supervised the loading of both patients, giving the flight medic a rapid briefing on treatment provided and ongoing concerns. As the helicopter lifted off, she allowed herself 1 slow breath. Both hostages alive. The mission successful. Webb appeared beside her, his face streaked with dust and sweat. Outstanding work, Merrick. Both phases. You just proved that your father's training and your medical expertise aren't separate things. They're 2 parts of the same whole. Sloan looked down at her hands, still covered in blood, the same hands that had squeezed a trigger 3 times less than 20 minutes ago. I'm not sure that makes me feel better, Staff Sergeant. It should. You saved lives today in ways that conventional soldiers couldn't. That matters. Back at FOB Falcon, word of the mission spread quickly. By evening formation, everyone knew that the medic had provided sniper overwatch and then performed emergency surgery in a hostile compound. The story grew with each retelling. Some versions had her shooting while simultaneously treating wounded. Others had her taking down a dozen guards single-handedly. Sloan ignored all of it. She cleaned her equipment, restocked her medical supplies, and filed her after-action report with clinical precision. But she couldn't ignore the formal formation 2 days later. The battalion commander called her front and center in front of the entire company. Major Holland stood beside him with a folder in his hands. Sergeant Sloan Merrick, the colonel began, his voice carrying across the assembled formation. In recognition of exceptional performance under combat conditions, demonstrating both medical expertise and tactical proficiency, you are hereby commended for actions that saved civilian lives and ensured mission success. He pinned a commendation medal to her uniform. Sloan stood at attention, face neutral, despite the attention. Additionally, the colonel continued, the Army is creating a new training program based on your performance. Combat Medical Technician, integrating advanced medical skills with precision marksmanship capabilities. You will serve as the program's chief instructor. That got her attention. Sir, I'm not qualified to. You're the most qualified person we have, Sergeant. You've proven the concept works. Now we need you to teach others how to do it. After the formation, the squad gathered around her. Reed looked like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Hawkins held out a custom patch he'd clearly spent hours creating. The design showed a medical cross overlaid with crosshairs. Simple, direct, perfect. Figured you needed something official for the new role, Hawkins said. You earned it, Doc. Sloan took the patch and studied it. Thank you, Corporal. This means more than the medal. Yeah, well, Hawkins looked embarrassed. I was wrong about you. Thought you were just a medic who didn't belong outside the wire. Turns out you belong wherever soldiers need you. Both kinds of help. Reed finally found his voice. Doc, I owe you an apology. I doubted you could do this. Hell, I didn't think anyone could do this. But you proved it's possible to be both things at once. You don't owe me anything, Reed. I do. You saved Jensen. You saved Brooks. You saved those hostages. And you did it by being exactly who you needed to be in each moment. The young private's voice was serious. That's not just skill, that's wisdom. Stone approached last, his quiet presence somehow louder than all the others. Your father would be proud, Sloan, not because you can shoot, because you know when to shoot and when to heal. That's the difference between a soldier and a warrior. Webb pulled her aside after the others dispersed. Got something for you. He handed her an official document. Transfer orders to Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Assignment Combat Medical Technician Program Development and Instruction. You're going home, Merrick. Back to the States to build this program from the ground up. Select the candidates. Design the curriculum. Create the standards. Sloan stared at the orders. Staff Sergeant, I still have 4 months left on this deployment. Had, past tense, you're done here. The Army needs you doing something more important than running patrols in Iraq. This squad needs a medic. This squad will get a medic, a good one, but they won't get another you. Nobody will. That's why you need to teach others how to do what you do. Webb's expression softened. Besides, you've given enough to this deployment. Time to go home and help build something that'll save lives for years to come. That night, Sloan called her mother on the satellite phone. Mom, I'm coming home. Thank God. When 3 weeks, they're sending me to Fort Bragg to run a training program. Her mother was quiet for a moment. A medical program. Medical and tactical. Teaching combat medics advanced marksmanship. It's based on what I've been doing here. So you're going to teach others to be like you. Healers who can fight. If they have the aptitude for it. Not everyone does. But some do. And you'll find them and train them and send them out to save lives the way you have. Her mother's voice grew thick. Sloan, your father would be so proud. Not just of your skills. Of your wisdom. Of knowing who you are and refusing to be less than that. I broke my promise, Mom. You kept the spirit of it. You promised not to become what destroyed your father. And you haven't. You've become something better. Something he hoped for but never quite achieved himself. Balance. After they said goodbye, Sloan sat alone in the aid station one last time. Tomorrow she'd begin out processing, turning over her duties, preparing to leave the squad that had become family over 8 months of deployment. But tonight she allowed herself to remember. Her father teaching her to shoot at age 11. Patient corrections. Steady encouragement. Her mother making her promise at the grave. Tears streaming. Fear in her eyes. The first time she'd picked up a rifle here in Iraq. Breaking that promise to save lives. All of it leading to this moment. To understanding that she didn't have to choose between who her father trained her to be and who she'd chosen to become. She could be both. December 2006. Fort Bragg, North Carolina. 6 months after returning from Iraq, Sloan stood in front of a classroom filled with the Army's first combat medical technician candidates. 22 students sat at attention, combat medics from across the Army who'd been selected for this experimental course. The dark circles under her eyes had faded. She'd regained the 14 pounds she'd lost during deployment. The shrapnel wound in her leg had healed to a thin white scar. Physically, she looked like someone who'd never seen combat. But her students knew better. They'd all read her file. All heard the stories. My name is Sergeant First Class Sloan Merrick, she began. Over the next 16 weeks, I'm going to teach you to be 2 things simultaneously. Medics who can fight and fighters who can heal. This program exists because sometimes the best medicine is preventing casualties before they occur. Sometimes saving lives means taking one. She paused, making eye contact with each student. But understand this, you are medics first, always. The shooting is a tool. A capability you can employ when tactically necessary. It doesn't define you. Your medical expertise defines you. Your commitment to saving lives defines you. Everything else is secondary. Private First Class Dylan Reed sat in the front row. He'd applied for the program the day it was announced and had been accepted immediately. His recommendation letter from Webb had been glowing. Stone sat in the back, civilian contractor now, but still involved in the program's development. His quiet presence was both support and assessment. Chief Instructor Merrick, one student raised his hand. How do you reconcile taking lives with your medical oath to do no harm? By understanding that harm comes in many forms. Allowing soldiers to die when you have the capability to prevent it is harm. Failing to use every tool at your disposal to save lives is harm. The oath isn't about never using violence. It's about using everything you have, including violence, when necessary in service of healing. She led them through the curriculum: advanced medical procedures, precision marksmanship, tactical integration, the seamless transition between roles. But more importantly, she taught them the wisdom Wyatt Merrick had tried to impart in his final letter. Tools don't define you. Choices do. March 2007. 3 months into First MT course, Major Holland visited from his new assignment at the Pentagon. The Combat Medical Technician program is exceeding every expectation, he told Sloan in her office. We've already received requests from 3 other branches to adapt it for their forces. The Marine Corps wants to send 20 candidates for the next course. We can handle that, sir. Stone and I have refined the selection criteria pretty well. Holland gestured to the framed items on her wall: her father's Ranger tab, her combat medic badge, the custom patch Hawkins had made, and the letter from her father dated February 14th, 1998, preserved behind glass. You've built something that'll outlive both of us, Sergeant. That's legacy. It's not about legacy, sir. It's about saving lives. Sometimes those are the same thing. After he left, Sloan reviewed applications for the next course. She was looking for specific markers. Medical excellence, obviously, but also emotional stability, tactical awareness, the ability to compartmentalize without becoming disconnected. Most importantly, she looked for people who understood that this wasn't about being a shooter who happened to know medicine. It was about being a healer who could protect when protection was needed. Her father had tried to be both, and it had broken him. But he'd lived in a different time with different support systems, different understanding. She was building something better. June 2007. Montana. That weekend, Sloan drove home to Montana. Her mother met her at the door of the ranch house and pulled her into a tight embrace. You look good, sweetheart. Healthy. I feel good. The work at Bragg is challenging, but rewarding. They walked to the cemetery together. Her father's headstone was simple: Wyatt Merrick, SFC U.S. Army, 1965 to 1998. No flowery epitaphs. Sloan placed 2 items at the base: her marksmanship qualification badge and a photograph of her first graduating class of combat medical technicians. Dad, I figured out what you were trying to teach me in that letter you wrote 9 years ago. It took me a while, but I got there eventually. She touched the cold stone. You weren't trying to make me into you. You were giving me tools and trusting me to know when to use them. I finally understand that. Her mother stood beside her, one hand on Sloan's shoulder. He always said you were smarter than him. Said you'd figure out how to do what he couldn't. Balance the warrior and the healer. He wrote his letter in February '98. Did you read it before he died? The day before, he made me promise to send it if you enlisted. He knew you would eventually, even though you promised not to touch guns. Claire's voice softened. He understood you better than either of us realized. They stood in silence for a while. Then Sloan's phone buzzed. A text from Reed. Got my first save today. Arterial bleed tourniquet pressure evac. Patient stable. Thought you should know. She smiled and showed her mother the text. One of your students. One of my best. He's assigned to the 82nd Airborne. Same unit I served with. Full circle. Something like that. Back at Fort Bragg Monday morning, Sloan had a briefing packet waiting on her desk. Next deployment rotation. The 82nd Airborne was requesting 2 combat medical technicians to augment their medical platoon. She recommended Reed and another graduate named Patterson. Both had excelled in training. Both understood the dual nature of their role. Stone knocked on her office door. Got a minute, Chief? Always Sergeant. He settled into the chair across from her desk. VA just approved funding to expand the program. They want CMT training adapted for National Guard and Reserve units. 15 more instructors, 3 additional courses per year. That's ambitious. It's necessary. The concept is proven. Now we scale it. Sloan nodded slowly. We'll need to be careful with selection. Not everyone can do this. It takes a specific mindset. which is why you'll oversee all of it. They're promoting you to Sergeant Major. You'll run the entire combat medical specialist school. She absorbed that information. Sergeant Major, the highest enlisted rank. Leadership responsibility for a program that was reshaping how the military thought about combat medicine. That's a lot of trust, Stonane. You've earned it. The question is whether you're ready to step up to that level. Sloan looked at the items on her wall, her father's Ranger tab, her medical credentials, the letter from February 1998 giving her permission to be both things at once. I'm ready. That evening, she stood on the rifle range, watching her current class run through scenarios. Sniper shots followed immediately by trauma care. The seamless transition she'd pioneered was becoming second nature to them. Reed was there as a guest instructor sharing lessons from his deployment. The kid who doubted her ability at the beginning was now one of her strongest advocates. Webb had retired and taken a job as a contractor, but he'd visited last month. Told her the squad still talked about Doc Merrick, still used her as the standard. Hawkins had recovered fully and was now running the Army's designated marksman school. He credited Sloan with changing how he thought about marksmanship as a medical tool. The ripples were spreading. Every student she trained went out and saved lives. Every life saved created another ripple. Families kept whole. Soldiers kept alive. The mathematics of impact grew exponentially. This was the legacy her father had hoped for without knowing exactly what form it would take. Sloan walked the firing line, correcting stances and offering guidance. One student was struggling with the transition from shooter to medic. Too much adrenaline, not enough control. Specialist Patterson, she said quietly, the shooting and the medicine aren't separate skills. They're the same skill applied differently. Breath control, steady hands, precision. Whether you're squeezing a trigger or placing a suture, the fundamentals are identical. Patterson nodded, trying again. This time the transition was smoother. By the end of the day, all 22 students had demonstrated competency in both roles. They weren't perfect yet. That would take time and experience. But they were getting there. Stone joined her as the sun set over the range. Your father would be proud, you know. You've said that before. It's still true. You took what he taught you and made it something better. Something sustainable. That's the hardest thing a soldier can do, improve on their teacher's lessons. Sloan was quiet for a moment. I used to think I had to choose. Be a medic or be a shooter. Be my mother's daughter or my father's legacy. But that was the wrong question. What's the right question? How do I honor both? How do I be exactly who I am without apology or compromise? And the answer, this. She gestured at the range, at her students, at the program she'd built. Teaching others that they don't have to choose either. That the best warriors are the ones who know when to fight and when to heal. August 2009, 3 years after Iraq deployment. Sloan stood in the Pentagon briefing room presenting combat medical technician program results to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The program had trained 143 specialists, 0 preventable deaths among soldiers under their care, 17 confirmed hostile eliminations that prevented mass casualty events. The numbers spoke for themselves. After the briefing, she walked through Arlington National Cemetery, found her father's grave in Section 60 with the other Somalia veterans. The headstone read Wyatt Merrick SFC, 75th Ranger Regiment, 1965 to 1998. She placed her new rank insignia at the headstone. Sergeant Major, the culmination of everything he'd taught her and everything she'd learned on her own. I got your letter, Dad, the one you wrote in February 98 when you knew you were dying. Took me 11 years to fully understand what you were really saying, but I figured it out eventually. She touched the cold marble. You gave me permission to be both, warrior and healer, your daughter and my own person. Thank you for that. A young woman in Army uniform approached, mid-20s, medic insignia on her shoulder. She stopped a respectful distance away. Sergeant Major Merrick, I'm sorry to interrupt. I wanted to thank you. I'm in your program, 3rd class. Learning to be what you are. Sloan turned to face her. What's your name, Specialist? Bennett. Specialist Kira Bennett. And why did you apply to the program, Bennett? Because I watched a friend die when I could have saved him. I had the medical skills, but I couldn't reach him because of enemy fire. I couldn't protect him, so I could heal him. Her voice was steady, but her eyes showed old pain. I never want to feel that helpless again. Sloan understood that completely. Then you're in the program for the right reasons. Not glory, not to prove anything, but to have every tool necessary to save lives. Yes, Sergeant Major, exactly that. After Bennett left, Sloan stood alone among the white headstones. Thousands of soldiers who'd given everything, her father among them, though he'd died years after his service ended. They'd all been tools in someone's hands, instruments of policy and strategy. But her students would be different. They would be healers who could fight, protectors who could save. They would choose when to use violence and when to use medicine. That was the wisdom Wyatt Merrick had tried to impart in his final letter 11 years ago. The lesson it had taken Sloane years to learn, but one she now carried forward for the next generation. Sloane walked out of Arlington with her head high and her purpose clear. She had students to teach, lives to save through the people she trained. Her father's legacy lived on, not in nightmares and PTSD, but in calculated precision and controlled violence in service of healing. She'd found the balance he'd never quite achieved, and now she was teaching a generation of medics to find it too. Heal when you can, fight when you must, know the difference. That was the lesson. That was the legacy. That was enough.